UFOs in Yorkshire, England. My true childhood paranormal experience. Ever since I was a very young lad, I always pondered the existence of extraterrestrials, perhaps like all of us from a certain age. For me, growing up in the northeast of England, no older than 10, the existence of aliens, or UFOs for that matter, was as mysterious and uncertain as the existence of God himself. Even the existence of other things like vampires, werewolves, Bigfoot, or the Loch Ness Monster, Nessie as we Brits like to call her, was either as likely or unlikely to exist. As that young, blonde-haired boy with pointy ears, the only aliens I knew of were from the movies I watched. Whether it was War of the Worlds or Independence Day, these movies could only imagine the possibility of alien life and the consequences of that, without providing the real thing. But by the year 2012 and barely into secondary school, it would seem I may finally have my answer, whether I really accepted it or not. I have already recently shared both of my childhood UFO experiences before. But being a writer by trade, I thought I'd use my craft to revisit them, in the hope of fleshing out as much of these two mysteries as possible, so I can decisively decide if what I saw as a boy was indeed real or not. For the reader, it will also be up to you to decide if the events I witnessed happened as I saw them, or if my childhood imagination got the better of me, or if I'm really just full of it. Not that it's really worth much of a damn without any evidence, but the following of what I'm about to tell you did in fact happen, as I saw it, and to the best of my recollection. By the year 2012, I had been growing up in the East Riding of Yorkshire for the past 7 years, in the average-sized but oddly named port town of Goole. This town was of no particular interest, except perhaps for its two landmarks, two rather tall water towers, humorously named the Salt and Pepper Pots. Settled beside a tributary river, Goole was sparsely surrounded by patches of farmland and large crop fields, perhaps the perfect setting for a UFO story, like the crop circle stories I knew of in the United States. However, my first UFO experience wouldn't happen in some field on the outskirts of town, but in the town itself. More precisely, it would happen no more than 100 meters outside of my bedroom window. Unfortunately, I don't remember the precise year this first event took place, although I do know it happened in either 2011 or 2012. Therefore, I was either in my final year of primary school, or my nerve-wracking first year of secondary. Regardless, I would have been around 11 years old. As a child and even through my teens, I was always a bad sleeper, either getting no sleep at all or waking up in the very early hours of the morning. It was on one of these early mornings that I woke up to my silent, pitch-black bedroom, with everyone else in my house fast asleep. Not having an alarm clock or phone to tell the time, I wondered what time of night it was, perhaps to know how much more sleep I could get. As I said, this was all a regular occurrence for me, as was peeking my head through the curtain next to my bedside to see if the sky was still dark. By looking out from my bedroom window, I would have seen my 20-meter-long garden which I regularly played football on, as well as the neighboring house on the other side of my back garden fence. But what I then saw, in the short distance over the roof of this particular neighboring house, would be a complete first. What I saw, flying, gliding, or simply just moving 100 meters or less away from my bedroom window, was what I can only describe as a flying saucer-shaped-like object. In the past, I described this object as the most stereotypical flying saucer shape you could ever see or imagine. The night was too dark to see its color, but I remember it making a distinctive humming noise as it moved over the town beneath it. But how I knew this object was saucer-shaped was because as it moved, or indeed hummed, a single row of small bright lights moved around and around. At that age, if I imagined a flying saucer, I would have pictured a particularly large craft. But this object seemed no larger than a car or a small van. The speed at which this thing moved was not particularly fast or slow, but fast enough so that what I was seeing was gone in the next 5 to 10 seconds. Not knowing if what I had just seen was in fact real or just a dream, I pinched and slapped myself hard enough to wake up almost anyone, but I was awake, and as you can imagine, I was in disbelief. If any one thing, paranormal or otherwise, that you didn't already know or believe in just appeared to you, confirming absolute proof, whether it was God or Jesus Christ, a heaven or a hell, even ghosts and yes, aliens. I think anyone would have had the very same first reaction. This can't be real, I must be dreaming, do I need to question the meaning and my own understanding of life? That was the reaction I remember having, rational in the face of the unbelievable. If you were to ask me what I did next, having witnessed such an extraordinary and incomprehensible sight, you'd be surprised to learn that what I did was simply lay back down on my pillow and eventually fall back to sleep. You'd probably be surprised, but that's what I did. The very next day, with the event of last night still fresh in my mind, I found my mum putting laundry away in her and my dad's bedroom. Feeling comfortable enough to tell my mum almost anything, even which girls at school I fancied, I told her exactly what I saw the night before. Like any parent would, having been told a fictitious-sounding story by your young child, my mum showed no indication of surprise or even shock, instead responding in the lines of "oh wow" or "oh really," as she carried on folding the laundry on the bed. I asked her if she believed me and she said she did, but even before I confessed to her what I saw, I knew she wouldn't. Maybe I just needed to get what I saw that night instantly off my chest, and telling my mum would be the best way to do it, without facing ridicule from my friends, being laughed at by my sister, or simply just ignored by my dad. As unbelievable as this story that I told my mum was, I knew what I saw that night was real, and I think most people on this planet know when they are dreaming and when they are not, and I just knew I wasn't. If this was the case, then what I saw from my bedroom window that night was indeed a flying saucer, a UFO. It may then come as a surprise to whomever is reading this, as it did for me, to learn that despite bearing witness to what appeared to be an unforgettable UFO experience, I had almost completely forgotten about what happened that night, not fully recollecting what I saw until the latter part of last year. Was I in denial at what I saw? Did my mind just choose to repress the memory of it? When I first wrote of this experience only recently, an online user speculated as much to me, that my young brain couldn't comprehend what I had seen and therefore repressed the whole experience. But, like I have already said, this would not be my only potential UFO encounter. And the next time, thankfully, I wouldn't be alone. During the summer of 2012 and having just graduated primary school, my 6 friends and I ventured almost every day to the exact same place along the outskirts of town. We had found a field with a small adjoining wooded area, and very quickly, this area became our brand new den, which we spent most days climbing trees or playing tag hide and seek. At the very end of our den was a 4 feet wide creek, separating the field we played in from the town's rugby club that was also on the outskirts of town. The reason I bring up this creek is because my friends and I, upon discovering it, would also spend a lot of our time there that summer. We enjoyed playing this juvenile game where one of us had to leap over to the embankment on the other side, or cross via a narrow wooden plank we found to make a bridge. Being the attention seeker I was at that age, I was always willing to jump up and over to the other side. In fact, I was the best. Anyone else who tried mostly ended up with 1 foot in the less than sanitary water. Several months later, however, and nearly halfway through our first year of secondary school, our tradition of jumping creeks and field hide and seek had sadly become far less frequent with the ongoing school year. That was until one afternoon, or maybe it was evening, I don't remember, my friends and I ventured back to our den and the nearby creek, crossing over and entering behind the grounds of the rugby club. These grounds consisted of 2 large rugby fields and a smaller patch of grass by the side, which is where the creek had led us. What the 5 or 6 of us were doing there, I'm not sure. We did sometimes use the grounds to play tag hide and seek, or other times we just explored. But what I remember next from that afternoon/evening, in whichever autumn month it was we caught sight of something flying in the not-too-distant sky, and heading directly our way. At first, we must have thought it was nothing more than an airplane or Royal Air Force craft, as our town had them passing the sky on a regular basis. The closer this thing got, however, the more it started to look like something else. Something none of us had probably ever seen before. It started to look like what our juvenile imaginative minds could only interpret as an alien spacecraft of some kind, so much so that one of my friends said something in the lines of, "Is that a UFO?" As though speaking the minds of all of us. Whatever this thing was, it was still coming our way and flying curiously low. As close as it was now, I think we were all waiting for this craft to visually clarify for us that it was some kind of plane. But what I can still remember vividly is this thing being directly over our heads, and my next thought while looking up to it was, that is a UFO, an alien spaceship. Before any other thought could then enter my mind, whether it be one of awe, dread, or panic, I hear one of my friends a meter or two behind me shout. By the time I look behind me, all I see is every one of my friends running away towards the embankment of the creek, as though running for their lives. If I recall, it was just me and my friend George who didn't. I'm sure I thought of running too, but I must have been in such awe or disbelief at what I was seeing, and even if I did run, I thought it was sure to abduct me. Whether I ran or stood right where I was, I felt convinced there was nothing I could really do. If it was going to take me, it would. When I turn away from my friends to look back up at what I see to be an alien craft, what I instead see is some kind of low-flying military jet, turned slightly away from us now and flying off. My friends also must have noticed it was just a military jet, as they had stopped running and now joined slowly back with the rest of the group, realizing there was nothing to be afraid of anymore. Although my memory of the following conversation is hazy, we did discuss what we had just seen, with every one of us indeed thinking it was a UFO at first, only to then realize it was a military jet. I don't remember the conversation going any further from there, or what we even did afterwards for that matter. We probably just went back into town and played football at the park. However, something I discreetly remember to this day is that in the next 2 years that I still knew them before packing up my things and moving abroad with my family, is that not a single one of us ever talked about the experience again. Not even for a laugh. There was no remember when we all thought we saw a UFO but it was really just a plane? I did drift away from most of these friends by the following year, as we were all in separate classes in school and played for rival football teams. So perhaps they did talk about the experience except without me there. In my last year before moving abroad, however, I did reacquaint myself with my best friend Kai, who was there that day at the rugby club. We had drama class together that year, and it was in these lessons that we learned all about these terrifying urban legends, in which the class afterwards had to dramatically perform them. It was also from these lessons that Kai and myself became obsessed with urban legends, so much so that we would watch scary YouTube videos about them. But in that same year, enjoying to be scared together, not once, to my recollection, did either of us ever bring up that experience at the rugby club. Not once. Kai was one of my friends I saw run away that day, so he was obviously scared by the craft as well. But I never brought it up either. In fact, I think I almost forgot about the experience altogether, just like my first experience a year prior to it. But what's even crazier to me is that I seem to forget about both of these experiences, regardless of what they were, for the next 10 years. If you're wondering why I am talking about this second experience, even though it only turned out to be a military jet, it's because since recollecting my first experience recently, and becoming acquainted with UFO lore and history, some things about that day at the rugby club just don't seem to add up to me. Number 1. If this was an RAF jet, then it was flying dangerously low, potentially 100 to 160 feet above us. From what I've researched, RAF jets can fly as low as 100 feet, but when it comes to populated areas containing vehicles and civilians, then it can go no lower than 500 feet. If this was a jet, it may not have even seen my friends and I, but it was still flying in and around a populated town. Number 2. I was 100% convinced that this craft flying over me was an alien craft, 100 feet or so above me, and that is what I believed I was seeing. It was only when I looked to my friends running away and then back again, that it was somehow now a military jet. Number 3, and perhaps the most confusing aspect of this experience, is that the RAF jet, from my recollection, made barely any noise. From what I've read, RAF jets at only 25 meters after takeoff are so loud it can rupture your eardrums. Like I said, this jet was no more than 160 feet above us, yet I could still hear my friend cuss the S word behind me. Having recently fallen down the UFO rabbit hole in the past year, I did come across one video, whether real or a hoax, of a spinning, bright, glowing light in the clear day sky that slowly morphed into a standard airliner. Although in the video this transition took the better part of a minute, I then wondered if the craft I saw that day could possibly have done the same thing. However, when I previously shared my experiences online only several months ago, one person rationally suggested that the craft I saw could have in fact been the Avro Vulcan XH558, which was active in 2012 and based at Doncaster Sheffield Airport, not that far from Goole. The Avro Vulcan is indeed a very odd-looking military craft, with wings resembling something like you would see out of Star Trek. Maybe that's why it was called the Avro Vulcan? From what I remember, in the few seconds that I fully believed this thing flying over me to be a UFO, it didn't strike me as flying saucer shaped, not like the one I had seen a year before. Regardless, whatever this craft was, it definitely struck me as alien at first, and maybe what I thought I was seeing was a different kind of alien craft. Or maybe it really was just a military jet, an oddly shaped one at that. If you were to ask me now, in the year 2024, if what I saw in 2012 was either a UFO or simply an RAF jet, for the sake of rationality, I would say it was just a jet, whose strange appearance merely confused a group of 12-year-old boys. However, to conclude the speculation of this second experience, I will leave you with this. Not long after posting of my experiences, an online user advised me to share my story with a specific UFO investigator, who particularly focuses on UFO activity in the Yorkshire area. Feeling in need of answers, I emailed this very same investigator. Intrigued by my story, he requested a conversation over the phone with me, and after relaying this second experience with him, highlighting how this jet was supposedly flying dangerously low, without producing much sound at all, he simply said to me that wasn't a military craft. If you were also to ask me whether I believe in aliens, I would say that I do. Not because of what I saw. I still don't know if what I saw was real. I do believe in aliens, or whatever they are. There are countless theories, simply because since I first fell down this UFO rabbit hole, learning of the experiences of many others, the existence of extraterrestrials no longer appears irrational to me. After all, can we really be the only intelligent beings to exist in this universe? The answer is I don't know. But what I do know is that for me, like it will be for countless others, the truth is still out there somewhere. Maybe even right here on our very own planet. Do you think the first UFO sighting was truly an alien craft? Do you believe UFOs are real, or is there another explanation?